that an appropriate amount of honor has not been extended, or that something that brought dishonor occurred. There have been duels that had fought early in the history of our nation. Our Vice President, Aaron Burr, challenged Alexander Hamilton, the Secretary of the Treasury, to a duel, and our Vice President killed the Secretary of the Treasury in a duel because Mr. Hamilton said something that Mr. Burr thought brought dishonor to him. I've seen friendships of long standing dissolve simply over the fact that someone felt like an appropriate amount of honor or recognition did not occur. And honor comes from without. It's based, dependent on the opinion of men, whereas character and integrity is the product of an individual's own heart. It is a product of the core principles that control his conduct, his attitude, and his spirit. Psalms 41:12, David makes reference to his integrity. He understood that integrity was a product of his own creation, had nothing to do with what men thought about him or their opinion of him. It was basically what David thought of himself and his character and integrity. In Proverbs 11:3 and Proverbs 19:1, there's a distinct contrasting between integrity and a perverseness of spirit. In Proverbs chapter 20 and verse number 7, it intimates that just men are invariably men of integrity and character. Give you an illustration of what I'm talking about. Job. He is a unique character. I know we don't have the entire history of Job, but the record that we have prior to his testing, it is my feeling that very possibly Job had never experienced a reversal in his life. Nothing negative had ever impacted him. And he is wealthy beyond measure. He is a man of influence and honor. And you know the story, the devil challenges God and God removes the hedge around him. And in the course of just one servant comes and says, your sheep are all gone. The fire of God has fallen from heaven and burn them up. And I'm the only one left alive to tell you. And while he was yet speaking, the Bible says, another servant comes and says that the enemies come and carried off your camel. And while he's yet speaking, another servant comes and says, another enemy has carried off your oxen and your asses. And while he's yet speaking, all of these things, while the other man is finishing up, and then finally one man says, your kids were all in a banqueting house, great wind blew out of the east, blew the house down, they're all dead. And in the course of, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, he's gone from prosperity and honor and all of these things to poverty, with, if you wish. And then finally he is there. He's covered with boils from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet. He's sitting in the ash heap, scraping the pus with a broken piece of pottery. And his wife posits the question to him, doth thou yet retain thine integrity? The word that's translated integrity there is a Hebrew word which speaks of a personal innocence. And she asked him, said, are you still the Job that I knew? Are you the Job that I've lived with? Or do you still have your integrity? And the reason she asked that is that she understood that the circumstances with which he was dealing could have, and often in many men's lives do, subvert their integrity and their character. And so here is this man. He is completely broken. And he is, I do not know what he must have looked like. I know that it was probably a sight like which none of us have ever witnessed, because when his close friends come to commiserate with him and they sit down and they see him, the Bible says, Brother Barker, that for 7 days they could not utter a word. They are struck dumb by the horrendous view that is before them. And these are his friends. These are the men who just a few days ago gave him such honor. And now they look at him. And when they finally are able to speak, they say, God, man, what have you done? Nothing like this ever happens to an innocent man. And they no longer gave him honor, because to them he was no longer honorable. Because honor is totally dependent on the perception and the opinion of others. It comes from the Hebrew word esteem, and it's out of our hands. And to really succeed in ministry and to be able to function and give God what He needs and expects of us, there will be seasons. I have experienced them. I'll guarantee you that are a little long in years have experienced them. If you have not yet, you will experience them. There will be seasons when you will have to function and perform without honor. Jesus said honor is a very fragile thing, especially in 3 areas. In a man's country, among his kin, and in his own house. And I'm not big into types and shadows, but I guess we could call the country our fellowship. The kin is our district. The house perhaps is our local church. And something that I have observed in my many years of ministry and especially in leadership is there is a possibility. In fact, there is a greater than possibility. I have seen many people in leadership, in ministry, who have succumbed to the temptation to be more concerned about honor than they are about integrity and character. And the result of that is peer pressure. Paul warned us not to do it, but we measure ourselves among ourselves and compare ourselves by ourselves. And that's just the opposite of God's value system. When we look at the ark and the mercy seat and all of the incredible Aaron's rod that budded and the pot of manna and the tables of stone, those cherubims, those angelic representations of God's providence and everything, they did not look across the mercy of God at each other. They looked down on the mercy of God. In fact, I was preaching last night, and I'll just reiterate that, you know, we are a generation that, because of honor, and it's not a bad thing, but because that so many men are extended honor, there is in terms of a competitiveness that arrives in the ministry, and we become enamored with how much and how many. And I know that that's not unimportant. We want to reach the whole world. We want to win everybody, but the kingdom of God is not a numbers racket. In fact, I told him last night, I said, what you have to understand, if you don't understand, is eventually you're going to live a life of frustration. God does not weigh on scales. He weighs on balances. With God, it's not how much or how many. He places your gifting, your abilities, your talents on one side of the balance, and He places your performance and your love for Him and your dedication and devotion on the other side. And if your performance comes into balance with your gifting and your talent, then He's going to say, well done. And you have to understand, God is not going to judge me. I'm not going to be judged by the gifting and talents of Ron Bodie. I'm not going to be judged by the gifting and talents of Gary Soanes or any of you other brothers, or David Bernard or Paul Price, or you pick the name. I'm going to be judged by the gifting and talents of Ron Mullings. That's the only one I'm in competition with. It's me. But if we succumb to the temptation to compare ourselves among ourselves and measure ourselves by ourselves, one of 2 things is very probably going to happen. If you measure yourself by someone else, and here's the deal, I don't have to look very far, Brother Bodie. I don't have to look very far to find a lot of people that don't measure up to my performance. Can't preach like I can, can't lead. And if that's all that I view, eventually I'm going to become arrogant and proud. But conversely, I don't have to look very far to find people that can just preach me under the table and leave me in the dust when it comes to leadership. And if that's all I focus on, I'm going to become despondent and discouraged. Right. And so we have to understand that we cannot do that, because we will crash and burn if we do. Most of the damage that's done to character is done in those 3 areas, as we have looked at. And honor comes from without. It's outside of my hands. I can't control it. I can't. But integrity and character, the only person that can damage my character is me. The devil can't do it. The brethren can't do it. Circumstances can't do it. Other people can't do it. But honor, that's a different matter. It comes from without. And often, whether we realize it or not, honor is bestowed by God, not necessarily because the person who's honored is deserving, but sometimes it's God's way of evaluating the brethren and testing all of us. I'll give you an illustration. When Joseph's brethren came to Egypt for corn, and Joseph recognized who they were, and he told them, he said, the next time you come back, I want you to bring your baby brother with you. So they brought Benjamin back, and now they're here, and the brethren, they don't understand, but somehow they have found favor with this great ruler, and he's honoring them, and it's just a great day, and he makes a banquet in their behalf, and they're just dumbfounded, and they come into the banqueting hall, and here they are, they're set down, and the world is starving, and yet here are all these sumptuous meals and food prepared for them, and every one of them has a servant that's waiting on them, and everything is just incredible until they look down at the end of the table. And Benjamin has 3 times as much food as they have, and he's got 3 servants waiting on him, and Joseph was not honoring Benjamin because Benjamin had merited it. Joseph was honoring Benjamin to test his brethren, to see if they could rejoice with a brother that prospered, with a brother that's being honored. He knew what their character used to be, and he's wanting to know, are these the same men that abandoned him and sold him, or has something taken place? And then they get ready to go home, and Joseph's cup is hidden in Benjamin's sack, and the soldiers come and stop the procession, and they examine, and they find Benjamin's cup in the sack, and now Benjamin is haled off to prison, and he who was honored and extolled, and now he is in jail, and it had nothing to do with Benjamin. Again, Joseph is trying to determine, he's testing his brethren, whether those that could rejoice with the man that was being honored, are they still willing to be a good brother to a man who now is not seemingly in a position of honor. In fact, maybe he's in a position of dishonor, and you can judge me for what I'm going to say if you want to. And I don't justify any sin, I don't justify any transgression, but I have seen men who have failed in an area, and sometimes it's even morally, and I've seen them come among us, and I've seen brethren turn their back and walk away, and don't want to be seen with them, afraid I'm going to be tarred with the same brush, and sometimes I think it grieves the heart of God. Right. Yeah. Brother Bodie, I would like to think that I'm more concerned about character integrity than I am in honor. I would like to, and I don't mean that, but if something ever happened and you made a mistake, I would like to think that I would still come along beside you and be a brother to you and help you through that thing, and I not care what the other brethren thought. They can judge me however they wanted to.
Help us, Jesus. That's good.
Jesus. Lots of pressure in this hour. And here's the sad thing. You know, fundamentally, people don't brag on the basics. I will guarantee you that have children or that raise children, there was never a time in your life that you came upon your children unaware and they were not aware that you were listening in on their conversation. There was not a time that you heard one of your kids bragging, saying, yeah, my dad, he's such a good dad. He gets up every day and goes to work. He brings his paycheck home. He treats my mama like a lady. We've got a decent house to live in. We wear decent clothes. We got a car to drive. You've never heard that. Because people don't. Now, if you hit the winning home run at the company softball game, they'll probably brag about that. And that has nothing to do with the security of your family or the well-being of your family. It's those basic things that have to do. And as a man of God, sorry.
Tell it.
They're going to brag on the evangelist more than they brag on you, Pastor. He may take the same text and preach the same thing you did 3 weeks ago. And they can't even remember you did it, but they think it's the neatest thing since sliced bread because he did it. But the fact of the matter is, strong, stable, revival churches are not the product of traveling evangelists. And I honor the evangelist. Right. They're the product of a preacher that has the courage to step in that pulpit and feed them apostolic truth week after week.
Right.
That's good. It's the truth.
Right.
And they're probably not going to brag about it. But that's what's going to redeem them and save them. Especially true in our day. Matthew 24:12, he said, because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. Now, here's the thing. You need iniquity as it is used there. The Greek word that is there, it is not an act. It is not a specific sin. It is a mindset. It is an inclination. Yes. It's a tendency. Yes. And the tendency of our generation, unfortunately, even within the house of God in many quarters, is toward the world instead of away from the world. And that iniquitous character is eroding the character of our generation and the world out there. And it's trying to insinuate itself into the church. And in many regards, the way it does it is Aesop in his fable, The Lion and the Fox, said familiarity breeds contempt. And many people, even in the ministry, we're becoming familiar with this apostolic truth and familiar with holiness and familiar with all these things. And if we're not careful, the familiarity with these things can cause us to feel a little contemptuous of them. We're losing character as a society. And it's insinuating itself into the church. And God forbid, even in some cases, I've seen it insinuating itself into the ministry. Give you an illustration in the natural. Women. I want to tell you what, my wife is a lady. And I treat her like a lady. Yes. And I respect her like a lady. Because she comports herself like a lady. In our society as a whole, we're dealing with unwomanly women. They don't act like women. They act like men. They're brash. They're harsh. And as a result, our society is losing respect for women. Right. And same thing can happen in the house of God if we're not careful as we become familiar with sin. And don't say you don't. Don't say that you're not becoming familiar with sin. I was standing in the checkout line at the market the other day, and I just happened to look over at the array of magazines there by the checkout counter, and I looked at cover after cover after cover, and I thought, dear God in heaven, when I was a teenage boy, that was the centerfold of Playboy magazine. And now it's right there, and it doesn't offend me anymore. Just gotten accustomed to it. Right. Contempt. But if we're not careful, if we succumb to the temptation to crave honor and recognition, and it is inevitable that we're going to sacrifice character. The Bible understands that. Paul said the spirit's willing, the flesh is weak. Now, here's some of the dangers. 127:3 of Psalms, the psalmist said, children are the heritage of the Lord. I am grateful that early on in my ministry, the Lord really took me to the woodshed. And I realized that my first calling as a preacher was to be the high priest of my own house. My first responsibility is to get my wife and kids to heaven. And so I established some priorities early on. Number 1 is me and God. Number 2 is me and my lady. Number 3 is me and my kids. And number 4, the church can have whatever's left over. But I'm sorry, they're not coming between me and my God. They're not coming between me and my lady. They're not coming between me and my kids. And if that hurts their feelings, there's 20-something Jesus-named churches in Bakersfield. They go find another pew to set in. Hello?
Sure. Right.
Yeah.
In fact, in 22:6 of Proverbs, it says, train up a child in the way it should go. Now, you understand, the Bible wasn't written in King James English. And sometimes translations, they're good. We can take King James and get to heaven, but it's not totally, the implications are not, the word that's train up there doesn't mean to discipline or, it's actually a Hebrew word which means to throttle or to choke yourself. So what the wise man is saying is there are times you're going to have to throttle yourself for the benefit of your kids. You're going to have to understand that the pressure's on you to restrain yourself, to guard your mouth, to guard your house, to make sure that you're not questing more for honor than you are character and integrity. And the real danger comes not just in craving your honor, but when you're put in a position where you want to crave honor for them and you're tempted to defend something that's wrong, something that's not right. In Deuteronomy 6 and 4, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And, you know what and is? It's a conjunction. That means what I'm going to say now is the last statement was not a complete. That means this is part of that last statement. And that last statement is not complete without this. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy might. And, we're not through yet. These words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart. And, we're still there. Thou shalt teach them diligently to thy children. Thou shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, when thou walkest by the way, when thou liest down, when thou risest up. You know, our children pick up our values.
Right.
And you need to guard your mouth when your kids are around. This was driven home so forcefully to me some years ago. My youngest daughter, Amy, and she's not all that young. She's 45 this December. But a few years ago, the choir was singing, and she was going to sing a lead. And she said, I want to testify. I didn't ask anybody's permission, but I want to testify. Said, I want to tell my parents how much I appreciate their character and their integrity. And I thought, wow. Cool. She said, here's the deal. Said, a short time ago, we had a family gathering where there was a lot of the extended family that we hardly ever see. It was there, and said, it just so happened that my dad and I were seated at one of the tables where a number of these extended family members that we hardly ever see were there, and said, one of them brought up the subject of something that had happened apparently when I was just a baby, and said I could tell that it made my dad uncomfortable, and he quickly moved the conversation on, and I said, wait, what are you talking about? What? And said this extended family member explained to me that there was a time when I was just an infant that another preacher had come to my dad and said he was in a real dire straits, in a real dilemma. And he asked my mom and dad if they would do certain things to help him out of this dilemma. And he made covenants with them what would happen if they would do that. And said my mother and dad did that, and they helped him through this thing, and he got out of it in pretty good shape. But said the thing is, when he got out of his dilemma, he just walked away. And she said he left my mother and dad in a financial situation that took them several years to crawl out of. And said, here's the thing. Said that preacher has been a tremendous blessing in my life. Said, in fact, I would have to give him part of the credit that I'm still living for God today. And she said, if I had known what he did to my mother and dad, those are blessings that I could have never received. But the problems occur when we become more intrigued with recognition and honor than we are with character. It said, thou shalt teach them. It's a Hebrew word which talks of transferring conduct and core principles. Those are important. And sometimes, as a preacher, as a parent, as a husband, as a leader, you are faced with an incredibly difficult choice. Am I more interested in saving face, or am I more interested in being right with God? And you can say, oh, that's no big deal. Oh, yeah, it is. When you have to make a decision that's going to perhaps reveal some inadequacy on your part, or a mistake that you made, maybe not a mortal failure, but just something that you know is going to diminish you somewhat in the eyes of the brethren. But the only way you can really get right with God is to make that confession. What are we going to do? Are we more impressed with honor, recognition, or character and integrity? We become concerned more with what our peers think of us than the opinion of God. And the danger there, the prophet said, woe when all men speak well of thee. It breeds a philosophy that's very dangerous, because you can come to a point that your thinking is that it really is not a matter of what something is right or wrong. It's the real essence is of what others think. Even to 29:15, Proverbs said, a child left to himself will bring shame You know, you that still have children at home, I'm going to let you in on a secret. Your kids expect ungodliness and rebellion and backbiting and gossiping and running people down at school. Where they should not expect it is around your dinner table. That's good. Deuteronomy chapter 6, let's go on. Verse number 10. And, everything's been an and. This is still part of 6 and 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. You see, you really cannot make him Lord unless you are adding all of these other things to your concept of what it is to please God and to love God. And it shall be when the Lord thy God shall have brought thee into the land which he sware unto thy fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, to give thee great and goodly cities which thou builded not, houses full of good things which you filled not, wells digged which you dig not, vineyards and olive trees which you didn't plant. When thou shalt eat and be full, then beware lest thou forget the Lord which brought thee forth out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. You know, even in the ministry, I have to battle it. Brother Soames, when I entered the ministry, dear Lord, when it was my turn to step in the pulpit, there was such an electric, ecstatic excitement in me about the word of the Lord and about the church and about the people. And I have to battle because there have been seasons it just became my job, just became my responsibility. Oh God, I got to get another Bible study ready. Oh God, I got to preach again Sunday. Yes, sir. All right. But the writer of the Hebrews in verse 1 said, therefore we ought to give the more earnest heed to the things we've heard, lest at any time we let them slip. And the word that translated slip there is a Greek word which speaks of adrift, and it's like a boat that has been in the stillness of the night hour, has been loosed from its moorings, and it's just slowly drifted out with the tide until now the daylight has come, and the inhabitants of the boat wake up and they look around and they don't know where they're at, and they don't really know how they got there. And Paul said, if we're not careful, we can do that because our ambition, our focus, our goal shifts from character and integrity to honor and recognition. That's why Hebrews chapter 4 verse 9, or Deuteronomy 4:9, he said, take heed to thyself, keep thy soul diligently, lest thou forget the things which thy eyes have seen, lest they depart from thine heart all the days of thy life, but teach them to thy sons and thy sons' sons. I think personally, and this is going to be a harsh statement, but I think facts bear me out, that if there is a singular hallmark of this generation, it's carelessness after God. Yes. And I think a lot of it is a result of the fact that many in this generation quest more for honor than they do character or integrity. And if we're not careful, we come to a point where our validation comes more from the brethren than it does from God. The result of not obeying Deuteronomy 4 and 9 is Judges 2:10, and also all that generation were gathered unto their fathers, and there arose a generation after them which knew not the Lord. Now, here's the sad thing. You know those houses and cities they didn't have to build? That generation still had them. The orchards and vineyards they didn't have to plant? That generation still had them. All of these things that they inherited labor-free when they came in to the land of promise, that generation still had them. And they had a form of religion. They still had the Ark of the Covenant. They still had the tables of stone. They still had Aaron's rod that budded. They still had the pot of manna. But they forgot 6 and 7 when it became more about honor than it did character. Many times the reason that young people don't reverence or respect the ministry and leadership and authority at church, quite frankly, it's because it's not honored at home. That's why Romans 13:11, Paul said that knowing the time, now it's high time to wake out of our sleep. For now is our salvation nearer than when we believed. For the night is far spent, the day's at hand. Let us therefore cast off the works of darkness, and let us put on the armor of light. Let us walk honestly, as in the day, not in rioting or drunkenness, or in chambering and wantonness, not in strife and envy. Put you on the Lord Jesus Christ, and make not provision for the flesh to fulfill the lusts thereof. Talks about the works of darkness. In Ephesians 5:11, he goes on to say, have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness. The word fellowship there is simply a Greek word which means to be a co-participant. It's an active thing, not a passive thing. And Jesus nailed it down in this way. He said, if you're not for me, you're against me. People say, well, I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm not. But Jesus said, if you're not for me, you're against me. That's why 18:1 of Proverbs, one of the most powerful verses of Scripture in the whole Bible, said, through desire, a man seeketh. You know, I've told the people in our church, I've heard people say, man, I wish I had a prayer life like so-and-so. No, you don't. If you wanted one, you'd have one. Oh, I wish I could embrace holiness like so-and-so does. No, you don't. If you did, you would. You are what you, I'm sorry, but you are what you are because that's what you want to be. If you're prayerful, that's because you want to be. If you're prayerless, that's because you want to be. If you're fudging on holiness, that's because you want to. If you're arrogant and conceited, that's because you bought into this concept of honor and recognition more than character and integrity. I'm old and ain't a thing you can do to me. Through desire, I am what I am because that is what I want to be. Now, I'm okay, there's the runway. I'm fixing to land, okay? It is impossible. If you don't remember anything else I say, remember, it is impossible to pursue both honor and character. Now, you can have both, but you cannot quest after both. That cannot be your goal, is to have both. You can either pursue honor or you can pursue character and integrity. And if you pursue character and integrity, the probabilities are that eventually honor will come to you. Because Romans 13:7 says honor goes to whom honor is due. And the word due there is the Greek word to be drawn. There's something about character and integrity that somehow eventually draws honor. And what most draws lasting honor is not performance, it's not hype, it's character and integrity. And true honor usually comes to those who had at some point in their life or ministry had to live without it. I've had both. Enjoyed the honor a whole lot more. But I mean, as in my earlier years, I'm going to be very transparent today, okay? Here I am. In my earlier years, there was a select group of brethren in this district that just for, I don't know, maybe I did something, maybe, but anyhow, they just decided they didn't approve of me. In fact, one time Brother Price came to me, put his arm around me, and he said, Brother Mullings, for God's sake, don't get so upset when everybody doesn't like everything about you. He said, my God, man, you don't even like yourself that well. But this group of brethren just, and I wanted them to approve of me. I probably wouldn't have, but Brother Bodie, I would have been tempted to preach against Vic Sav and bubblegum if I'd have thought it had won their approval. And in fact, about 30 years ago, the senior camp principal was resigning, and the youth committee came to me and wanted to know if I would be senior camp principal. I told him, I said, no, that's not my thing. I'm honored, but no, I don't. So, and a few days later, they contacted me again and said, Brother Mullins, we can't find anybody we feel like we really, would you please do that? I said, really, thank you, but no thank you. I'm not. So the third time they came to me and said, Brother Mullings, here's the deal. Would you take it for 1 year to give us a chance to really... I said, okay, 1 year. I will do that. I'll give you 1 year. And a few days later, brother, this group of people went ballistic. My God, our young people are going to hell in a handbasket. Mullings is going to be the senior camp principal. And so a few days later, Brother Price called me and said, Brother Mullings, said, we were just talking and thinking, and we thought, man, you got a revival church and you got good things going on. You don't need to be burdened down with this. I said, Brother Price, I know what the problem is. It's cool. You don't have to worry. You don't have to beat around the bush. You can have the job back. I understand. I'm okay. I'll be all right. And, but it really hurt. And then 22 years ago, they elected me district superintendent of the whole district. Go figure. But fundamentally, there's a scene in Shakespeare's Hamlet where a statement is made, and it is not scripture. But if there's anything that was ever written in the secular realm that I think almost qualifies, Hamlet simply says, to thine own self be true. And so, brethren, be careful with this fragile thing called honor. It's not a bad thing. It's a very enjoyable thing. But it is a very dangerous thing when that becomes the focus and the goal of your ministry. Songs, God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bishop Mullings. Let's give him a hand clap. I love to hear others teach and preach, especially when you teach on the level for ministry. It just seems to feed my soul.
Yeah.
And we love to feed our churches, but we need to love to have our souls fed as much as we love to feed our churches. I feel like I've been fed today.
Amen.
Received something so beautiful. And we need teaching like this.
Yes.
We really do. We've got to be more interested in integrity than in honor. I must please God. I don't have to please you.
Hear it.
I don't have to please you. I try, but I don't have to please you. I must please Him. There's where integrity comes in. I wrote a little note not too long back, and basically it says, you are what you are in private.
That's right.
You are what you are in private. That is the deepest description of who we really are. And sometimes all of us know that we've got to work on our lives. We must work on our spirits. We must work on our hearts. And I want God to do that for us. My message this Sunday to our church is titled, The Heart of the Matter. I want to preach on what's in the heart. I want to preach on how important that heart is. How important that we guard that heart with everything that is within us. For out of it issues life. Life comes from that heart. And I've known some younger men through my years that had a little success. And I've known some of that success to go to their heads. And I've seen that, and I've dwelt with that. And their church all of a sudden becomes more important than everybody else's church, or their ministry, or their teaching in their eyes becomes more important to someone else. And I've seen those same good young men get to a point to where they don't receive instruction or correction from others. And my pastor said a statement one time, and I've tried to live by this. He says there's 4 things you've got to be if you're going to be successful in ministry. 1, you've got to be faithful. The second thing you've got to be is loyal. And loyalty is faithfulness to a person or to an organization. He said the third is a lot more difficult. He said you've got to learn to be obedient. He says the fourth one's the hardest of all. You've got to have the ability to be corrected.
Yes, sir.
Every one of us needs some correction.
Yep.
Every one of us needs some correction every once in a while. But if we get too big to receive that correction, or we feel too important to receive that correction, then where's our hope? Our hope is in the ability to hear the word. You know, God is so merciful to us. Most of the time He corrects us as ministers, it's through the word that we hear. Just like for our saints, most of the time they get corrected is through a good preached word of God. And when we go somewhere and we hear the word of the Lord, and there's something in there that really strikes close to home, we've got to have a tender heart. And we've got to take it to heart. And we've got to examine our own hearts. Amen. I heard some good things today. I wrote down some notes today that I want to watch my own life. Thank you, Bishop Mullings. So good to hear from somebody that's been there and done that, and you realize what is important in life. And I feel your heartbeat. Your heartbeat is to let us know what's important in life. Try to speak to our hearts. And so that's so very important. I left Spain, and one of those young men that had some success felt like he was the heir apparent to the leadership of that work there, yet his pride disqualified him. His pride caused him, his desire to be recognized, his desire to be considered the main person there, led him to do some things that lacked integrity, led him to do some things to manipulate the outcome. And unfortunately, led him down the path of sin. Because integrity is just our wholeness before God. And when we desire things that we shouldn't desire, then it's going to be replaced with things that are our weakness, our failure. Every one of us struggle with a giant or two in our life. Every one of us. Mine might be different than yours. Yours might be different than mine. But if we're not careful, we don't keep that under subjection at a time of when we're not being careful enough, those things will rise up. We will rise up. He wanted influence, and wanted influence so bad that he was willing to try to destroy the influence of others to get it. And that's a lack of integrity. And the Lord spoke to me one morning. I was praying here, and the Lord told me He's going to destroy his influence. He's going to destroy that influence. And it happened a few months later. And God has a way of evening things out.
Yes, sir.
What's really here in our hearts over time is going to come out. It's going to come to the surface. Let's take about a 10-minute break here. One. And then we'll come back and continue into our meeting. Thank you so much.
The sons. Is it okay if I?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please. Please. Yeah. I was hoping that's what you'd be able to. Please do.
7:30.
7:30.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll see you then. Thank you so much.
We do all this for 7 hours a day for those guys, so they wouldn't have to come back twice. Suckers don't even show up.
Just see what this guy's working on.
Where's your cousin Gilbert?
Haven't heard? No, I'm just kidding. I heard.